From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Our series of General Assembly debates continues. This week on Newsmakers, voters in Lincoln, Johnston, and much of Smithfield have two candidates for state representative to choose from in next month's Democratic primary. Incumbent Representative Peter Petrarca is seeking a sixth term. An attorney, he's part of House Speaker Gordon Fox's leadership team as Senior Deputy Majority Leader in the House of Representatives. His challenger has a familiar last name. Gregory Costantino is Vice President of Venda Ravioli on Federal Hill and a real estate developer. He's also the brother of former House Finance Committee Chair Stephen Costantino. Petrarca, Costantino, head-to-head on this campaign 2012 edition of Newsmakers. Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi and Eyewitness News analyst Arlene Violet. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for agreeing to come on the program and help voters decide who they're going to choose come September 11th. Let's begin first with a simple opening question. I'll give you each 30 seconds to respond, and we'll start with the incumbent. Mr. Petrarca, why should voters re-elect you to the House of Representatives?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of work left to be done in District 44 in the state of Rhode Island to improve the quality of life in the state. And I've lived with cerebral palsy my entire life, and I've faced numerous challenges, and I've persevered over those obstacles, and I understand what it is to have a challenge and how to overcome it.
5 seconds.
And there's solutions. Every time you have a challenge, there's a solution, and I can come up with the solutions, and I'm asking my constituents to send me back and let me move forward with those solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Petrarca. Same question to you, Mr. Costantino. Why should voters elect you to state?
I've been a lifelong resident of Rhode Island, and I'm a resident of Lincoln with my wife and my children. It's completely unacceptable to me that we have second highest unemployment rates in the country. In addition to that, our taxes are high. In addition to that, we have some of the highest auto body repair costs in the nation, and we're 50th in the nation for business growth. Residents
5 seconds left.
Residents are leaving, businesses are leaving, and our children have no future here.
Thank you, Mr. Costantino. I'll start first question with you, Mr. Petrarca. In an Ed Fitzpatrick column in the Journal, you were responding to accusations that your opponent, and you just alluded to him there, about an auto body bill. And we're going to get into the auto body bill in a little bit. But in explaining your position, in part, you noted a 2009 Supreme Court decision that meant the Ethics Commission can't police lawmakers for a conflict of interest in their votes. You said something that the average voter might be shocked by. You said, quote, "Given the ruling, we have legislative immunity to do anything we want on that floor," basically. Anything you want?
No, that's obviously, I said it on the phone. There's no question. If he quoted me, I said it like that. That's not what I meant. The legislative immunity simply means if we take the bill in itself, I abstained from the vote. However, under that ruling, I would not have had to abstain from the vote, but I did out of an abundance of caution. What I was speaking of on that occasion is that when a colleague would ask me a question about any type of legislation or that auto body legislation, I would answer his question, and I am free to do so.
Let me ask you specifically about the Ethics Commission. You know, should lawmakers be held accountable if they're benefiting themselves through legislative activity? Should the teeth be placed back into the Ethics Commission?
No, the teeth should be placed back into the General Assembly. They should have their own ethics committee, just like the federal government does. I don't feel that the federal government is any better than we are, and I think we would do a very good job at policing ourselves. We should have our own ethics committee.
So you would, you in 2010, you voted to restore the Ethics Commission. If that came up again, you would vote against it?
No, I wouldn't vote against it, but I believe there was a bill put in, or there was discussions about having our own ethics committee. If we don't move forward with our own ethics committee and a bill comes to the floor to reinstate the ethics committee itself, I would vote for it.
I guess I don't understand why we need to make a whole new ethics committee in the General Assembly when we have one that the voters enacted in the mid-'80s.
Because I don't feel that we have to go to an outside source to police ourselves. The Congress and the senators don't. Why do we?
Well, Mr. Costantino, how do you feel about that? How would you have voted on that one?
I would have voted to have the Ethics Commission there and rule on anything that has to do with the General Assembly. I do want to add, and I'm in total agreement, I mean, as far as him talking to his colleagues, I don't have a problem with that, but he did vote on legislation regarding auto body shop legislation. He voted on it. And at that point, I think there's a conflict of interest. And I'll go back to 2003. He voted on a bill regarding auto body shops. And in 2010, he voted on bill number 2508, which is on tape here.
We're not going to do anything with that, Mr. Costantino. So
but it's on tape, and he's voted for.
All right, why don't we? Okay, since you
bills.
decided to change your, shift the conversation from what the question was about the Ethics Commission, why don't we go to Ted with a question here about the auto body bill?
Everyone's talking about it, the auto body bill.
Sure.
Why do you get involved in auto body bills at all when you know you're going to get terrible headlines in the Journal? It looks bad. Nobody wants their insurance bills to go up. Why are you involving yourself in this?
I didn't involve myself in this. I answered questions from my colleagues on the floor. I did not vote on the bill. I abstained.
What sort of questions then?
What the bill did, the issues in the industry. I have expertise from my family. So when someone asks me a question, I'm going to answer that honestly and openly. But out of abundance of caution, and let me say this, I have the class exception. I can vote on auto body bills because it doesn't affect my family any more than it affects the other 284 body shops. I just choose not to because we are perceived, or my family is perceived, as the largest. But I could still vote on all those bills. I could get up on the floor and debate it. So I don't feel I did anything wrong at all. I just took a different position and a different tact when it came to those auto body bills.
Have you ever supported a bill, or you mentioned the expertise you have, something that might not have been supported by the auto body industry if you're just providing information?
Have I ever supported a bill that hasn't been supported by the auto body?
A bill that involves the auto body industry, but perhaps they didn't actually want, but because you knew the industry so well, you said, well, this actually won't hurt them as much as their lobbyists say.
No, I believe I abstained on those too.
Mr. Costantino, you've obviously been very critical of the auto body bill and Mr. Petrarca's involvement with that, but at the same time, you come from a family that's steeped in Smith Hill politics as well. Why should voters see you as an agent of change up there?
Well, let me just say this. My brother was a representative for 18 years, but this isn't about my brother. This is about Greg Costantino. This is about Greg Costantino wanting to bring change to the district. And I think that the voters are tired of hearing the same old, same old. I think they're tired of hearing the fact that we can do anything we want on that floor. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. And I think people want change. And like I said, my brother's been there for 18 years. You know, we're a working family. You know, we own Vendor Ravioli, and you know, it's what we want to do.
Well, let's say a bill about ravioli came up.
I would not vote on it.
But would you discuss it? Would you have discussions on the floor saying, well, actually, you know, this is why the ravioli people want it, and we're gonna do it because it's the same thing?
I probably would answer questions regarding that, but I wouldn't vote on it. And he's voted on 2 pieces of legislation that help auto body shops. He's actually voted on 2 pieces of legislation.
What 2 pieces of legislation, quickly, and then let's have Mr. Petrarca respond to
Well,
that.
2003 he voted on legislation, and 2 years ago, Bill 2508, he voted on legislation.
You shaking your head, sir?
I can't respond. I don't know what they do. I don't know what they are. There's a bill number. I mean, if we want to discuss businesses and family values, I mean, let's take a look at my opponent. My opponent committed voter fraud. My opponent's family has open loans, $125,000 from Province Economic Development Corporation, still not paid back. They got a sweetheart deal on a compassion center. Whether or not the lease went through,
Voter fraud's are pretty strong accusations. Why don't you back that one up?
Sure. In 2006, Mr. Costantino purchased his home in Lincoln. At the same time, he owned a home in North Providence. I believe it was 140 Only Avenue in North Providence. He then sold the home in North Providence in 2007, July of 2007. He had the wherewithal to register some cars in Lincoln in 2007 for the 2008 tax year. However, he, I guess, forgot to take the 5-minute ride to go register to vote. So in the March of 2008 presidential primary, he voted out of the North Providence location he no longer owned.
All right, Mr. Costantino, respond to that.
That's exactly what I did. I did vote out of the March 2008 primary, and it was a federal primary that I voted in. And I did talk to somebody at the Board of Elections, and as long as I voted in a federal primary, there wasn't a problem with that. It wasn't like I voted out of 2 addresses. We were in between properties, and I did vote.
All right, Arlene, let's go to you.
Okay. Do you think the power of labor unions here in Rhode Island have a detrimental effects on companies relocating here or opening a branch office here? Rep.
No, I don't think they have a detrimental effect. I think we've seen businesses move into the state of Rhode Island and work well with labor. I think labor still has a presence, although I don't believe it's as strong as it has been in past years.
Sir?
I don't think so. I don't think they have an effect. Not at all.
Let me ask you both on the economy, sticking with what Arlene brought up. Unemployment, 10.9% in Rhode Island right now. First, Rep, you know, it might seem unfair, but you're the one with the record up there. How much blame do you and other lawmakers bear for the economic plight Rhode Island's in right now?
Well, I don't know how much blame can be laid on the legislators when the entire country is in one of the worst, or coming out of one of the worst depressions in history. So we're doing what we can to alleviate the unemployment, and we're doing the best we can.
Like
we
what?
don't have, well, we've handled pension reform. That eliminates debt. We are attempting to bring manufacturing back to the state of Rhode Island. There was an article this morning on the EDC, which I thought was very good, and I think that we should explore that in having a board with private and public citizens working together to bring businesses in. But we don't only need the professors and the people who write the theory. We need the people who have their hands in the dirt, who built their businesses from the ground up and are successful. We need a blend of that, and I think we'll come out very well.
Mr. Costantino, I heard your critique earlier, but I want to know, what do you propose to do differently if you're elected and on Smith Hill? What bills will you propose? What policies will you support to bring down unemployment?
Well, I think it's very difficult right now for a business that's out of the, looking to come to Rhode Island to locate here. I don't think we make it easy for them to locate here. I don't think there's any programs to help, you know, move them forward. And I just think for our, you know, looking at vendor ravioli and our economic development loans, let me just say this, and I want to get back to it. If it weren't for Providence Economic Development Agency, we wouldn't have the vision to create what we created up on Atwells Avenue. And those loans were made available to us, and it was a great program. And what do I mean by that? We were able to create 340 jobs, new jobs at Vendor Ravioli. In addition to that, we pay the city of Providence and the state of Rhode Island millions of dollars in income based on that. And I just think we need to expand that type of...
We have to go to break, but I want to, on that topic, you had said, if I heard you correctly, he hasn't paid those loans back yet. Is that correct?
No, there's loans that his family has out that are not paid out, yes. $125,000.
And what I want to say is, Mr. Petrarca seems to be running against everybody in my family. He's running against my wife, my sister, my brother Stephen, my brother Alan, Vendor Ravioli. And my wife's loan of $125,000 is current, according to the...
You're paying them on time. They are not, or she, I should say, they're not delinquent.
She was in workout, and now it's been paid. It's paid on time.
Okay, we have to take a break here. You're watching a Newsmakers Campaign 2012 debate between Representative Peter Petrarca and Gregory Costantino. This is for District 44, Lincoln, Johnston, and Smithfield. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, Ted Nesi and Arlene Violet. And we're having a debate this week for District 44 Right here is Representative Peter Petrarca and his challenger, Gregory Costantino. District 44 is Johnston, Lincoln, and Smithfield. I'm going to move on to 38 Studios now. Mr. Petrarca, you voted to create the loan program that led to the $75 million 38 Studios loan. While, you know, we've heard from some rank-and-file lawmakers, they're pleading ignorance about who is getting that money. Some people can accept that. You were part of the leadership team during this. Do you regret that?
That's incorrect. I was not part of the leadership team.
So, okay, so
I was a rank-and-file member.
So you were going to plead ignorance about where that money was going?
Well, we were told what we were told by his brother. So maybe you should ask his brother what happened. We were told that the $125 million was there to create jobs. We were never told completely about 38 Studios on the floor.
I imagine people at home banging their head against a television set right now hearing your answer, because there was so much coverage surrounding 38 Studios at that time. We've heard from Speaker Gordon Fox. It wasn't that it was a secret that Curt Schilling was here and that it was being pushed by Governor Don Carcieri. So
correct,
again,
but the numbers were never revealed on the floor.
But you knew that some of the money was going to be going to 38 Studios at that time.
Correct, and they told us that the $125 million was to create jobs and was going to be parsed out. No one ever said that 38 Studio was getting $75 million.
What about your boss, if you will, now, the House Speaker,
yes,
Gordon Fox? Do you think he knew, and if so, does he owe Rhode Islanders an apology?
I would assume if Mr. Costantino knew, Stephen Costantino knew, I would assume that Gordon, Speaker Fox, knew. Whether he owes an apology, you'll have to ask him.
Well, Mr. Costantino, I mean, whether you like it or not, your brother did sponsor the 38 Studios bill, and you can't necessarily be held accountable for his actions, but I'm wondering if you think your brother made a mistake.
Well, I think at the time, with the information he had available to him, I think he voted what he thought was right for the state. And
he didn't just vote for it, he sponsored it.
He did. He voted and he sponsored it on behalf of the Speaker Fox. So I want to say that, you know, with the information they had available, with the governor pushing this legislation, with the EDC board pushing this legislation, I think that, you know, whatever they had available at the time, they made a decision and they brought it to the floor. But for the representatives to say we didn't know who or what or when, I can't believe that no one knew in that building exactly what that money was for.
All right, gentlemen, do you think there needs to be pension reform at the municipal level? And if so, what role should the General Assembly have in that reform? And give me specifics if you think there is a General Assembly role. Mr. Costantino.
Well, I don't know if there's a General Assembly role, but I like to look at Providence. And Providence was able to do pension reform. They brought everybody and sat them at the table. And I think that some wonderful things occurred there. And I think all parties were happy. So when you look at, you know, I think the city and the municipals should have the ability to do pension reform.
Should General Assembly keep its hands off?
I love this question.
Municipal reform?
Because there was a 1989 case, I believe it was Bruckwater versus Joseph Paolino, and that case is very specific. If the General Assembly wants to intervene in any specific city or town's pension system, it has to go to the voters and it must be statewide. So the fact of the matter is, as of today, still good law, we cannot get involved unless we put a question on the ballot to the voters for us to intervene.
Would you support such a question on the ballot?
I would support a question on the ballot, but it's quite obvious by what Providence is doing right now that they don't need it. They can do it
well,
themselves.
We're not talking about Providence. I mean, do you think there's a municipal reform problem?
No.
In other places?
No, I think that there's some mayors that just don't want to step up to the plate and handle their own backyard. I don't know like who I would, if you asked me before, I would say Providence. Providence is stepping up. Other ones I don't know. Maybe East Providence? Maybe they should do something?
Let me stick with pensions briefly. Mr. Petrarca, you voted for the pension reform bill. I assume you still support it from last November?
Absolutely.
And Mr. Costantino, if you'd been in the Assembly, would you have voted for the pension bill?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Next question. Casinos. This district includes Lincoln, where Twin River is. Huge, important thing for that community. Mr. Petrarca, first to you. Who negotiated the terms of the state's deal with Twin River and Newport Grand, the cut we're going to get, potentially?
I believe it was the leadership team, or the upper echelon of the leadership team with the governor and the track, I believe. I would say Speaker Fox, President Piva-Weed, and the governor. I will tell you that I was involved in the negotiations that gave the town of Lincoln revenue protection. We keep our share, and then if the revenues at the slot machine drop from year to year, we get an additional $1 million.
So do you think this is a good deal for your district?
I think it's the best deal in the light of what's coming down the road, and that's Massachusetts casinos, and we know for a fact if they open the doors, well, not if, when they open the doors, there's going to be a drop in revenue.
Mr. Costantino, same question to you. Do you think the bill that was signed by Governor Chafee for the casino revenue sharing is a good deal for your district? Or what would be your district?
I don't think it's a good deal for the district. I think we could have did much better. I think that that issue was pretty much done behind closed doors, and I think we gave it away. I think at the 18 cents that they're looking at, between the 13 and the 18 cents, I think we could have started at a higher rate and perhaps maybe dropped it. I want to commend the representative because he did protect the town of Lincoln, but I think we could have did much better for the town.
I want to ask both of you gentlemen a series of yes or no questions so we can cover a little bit more ground quickly. The incumbent will start with you, Mr. Petrarca. Yes or no, should same-sex marriage be legalized in Rhode Island?
Yes, with proper protections.
And Mr. Costantino?
No.
Yes or no, would you vote, Mr. Costantino, will start with you, yes or no, would you vote in favor of binding arbitration for teachers?
No.
Mr. Petrarca?
No,
Okay.
not as of today.
And yes or no, Mr. Petrarca, should the Economic Development Corporation continue to exist in its current state?
No.
And Mr. Costantino?
Absolutely not.
I want to explore the same-sex marriage question, if I could. You said with proper protections. Briefly explain what that means.
Well, with religious protections, provisions for religious institutions, whatever they may be, I just simply, being a handicapped individual, cannot look someone in the eye and say that your lifestyle is wrong or different. With what I went through as a child being ridiculed, I just cannot do it. I can't say to someone, you can't have protections.
Mr. Costantino, you said no. How about it? He's saying it's a civil rights issue. You don't view it as a civil rights issue?
Well, what I think is, you know, I'm against, I'm for civil unions, which he voted for last year. I'm for civil unions, but I think we should have a vote to put it on the ballot. I think the people of the state of Rhode Island should vote on it. I don't think it's up to one individual person.
Yes or no, should legislative grants continue?
No.
Sir?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because it helps communities. It absolutely helps communities, and there's always negative press on them. But there are a number of grants that are
Negative
tremendous.
press like the Sports Institute.
Correct.
Who took $500,000 in
Correct.
legislative grants.
Correct. Maybe legislative grants of that amount should be done away with. But the smaller grants that we give to baseball teams and food banks, we can't do away
Yeah,
with
some
those.
people say they're just slush funds for re-election.
They're not slush funds for re-election. They do great work. Those grants help great work in the communities.
Are they slush funds for re-election?
I think they are. I mean, you know, money, it's millions of dollars that are going out in a time when our budget is getting killed right now. I mean, we're going to have deficits down the road, huge deficits, and at some point we have to look at this.
I want to go back, not to the substance of the auto body bill, but the way it passed. It was one of many bills that passed at around 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, we've all been there, those late sessions. It gets pretty tiring. You've been up there for a while now, Mr. Petrarca. Is it necessary that the last session goes all the way till 3 or 4 in the morning? Why couldn't they come back for another day? Would you support changes like that?
I found that last year was a tremendous move forward with respect to what we did on the floor prior to the last day. We passed a lot more bills during the regular session. However, for some reason, I've been there for a while, for some reason, it's the way the House does things. They just wait until the last day or a couple days to move a lot of pieces of legislation. Could it change? Sure, I think we're working towards that. But it's been like that for years, and it's been like that before I was a representative.
One quick follow-up. Would you ever consider running for Speaker?
If at a certain time, yes, sure.
And Mr. Costantino, same to you. What about the way the House operates up there, middle of the night? Would you support, say, an hour where they stop and they always go home?
I just lost my mom, and my mom always had a saying, there's nothing good that happens at 3 o'clock in the morning. And believe it or not, nothing good happens at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was special legislation that went in that passed for auto body shop legislation, which would have raised everybody's rate in the state of Rhode Island for their cars by $200 to $300
That's
per
not
car.
true, but-
Well,
Briefly, then respond to it. What is the truth?
It's not true. First of all, the insurance companies have 40% more profit in the state of Rhode Island than national. Okay? The cost of repairs hasn't increased since 2008, and the premiums are down 7% since 2008.
You know,
So-
we've explored this a lot. Briefly, with 20 seconds left, quickly from the two of you, I want a letter grade for Governor Lincoln Chafee, Mr. Costantino.
B.
I'm sorry, a B?
B.
Okay, Mr. Petrarca?
C.
And for House Speaker Gordon Fox?
B plus.
B plus, and Mr. Costantino?
C.
C. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for joining us and agreeing to come in. We always appreciate that. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but it's important to help voters make a decision on September 11th. And the voters are in District 44. That's in Johnston, Lincoln, and Smithfield. Representative Peter Petrarca and Gregory Costantino. And to my right, we had Ted Nisi and Arlene Violet. I want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week on Newsmakers.
So that was it.